बिल्लाहि मिनश शैतानिर रजीम, बिस्मिल्लाहिर रहमानिर रहीम। रियल टॉक विद जबरान में जबरान असर की तरफ से अस्सलाम वालेकुम। नाज़रीन, दुनिया ग्लोबल विलेज है, इस बात से किसी किस्म का इनकार मुमकिन नहीं है। दुनिया के किसी भी कोने में कोई भी वाक़या हो जाए तो आपके मोबाइल की स्क्रीन पर, आपकी टीवी की स्क्रीन पर सबसे पहले आपको उसकी हाईलाइट नज़र आनी शुरू हो जाती है। कुछ हाईलाइट इतनी अचानक होती हैं कि वो मुसलसल आपकी स्क्रीन को इंगेज रखती हैं। ऐसी हाईलाइट बनी हफ्ते वाले दिन जिस वक्त हमास की तरफ से हमला किया गया इसराइल के इलाकों पर, बल्कि मकबूजा फ़लस्तीन के इलाकों पर, और उस हमले के बाद जिस तरह के हालात पैदा हुए, उन हालात पे आज गुफ्तगू करने की कोशिश करेंगे। उन हालात से पहले का अगर बैकग्राउंड का जायज़ा लें तो नाज़रीन 1947 से लेके अगर देखा जाए तो फ़लस्तीन का नक्शा सुकड़ता इस हालत तक पहुंच चुका है कि अब फ़लस्तीन तो शायद वहाँ पर नज़र ना आ रहा हो, लेकिन इलीगल सेटलमेंट्स, वेस्ट बैंक और बाकी बहुत सारी सेटलमेंट करने के बाद इसराइल का नक्शा ज़रूर बन गया। इसराइल की अरब दुनिया में बहुत ज़्यादा पहले भी जंगें हो चुकी हैं, मुख्तलिफ अरब ममालिक के साथ हालात ख़राब है। मोस्ट रिसेंटली जो बेहतरी की उम्मीद नज़र आई थी, वो बेहतरी जो इसराइल के लिए बेहतरी थी, वो बेहतरी ये थी कि इसराइल को UAE ने एक्सेप्ट कर लिया था। अब मुत्तहिदा अरब अमारात की तरफ से इसराइल को तस्लीम करने के बाद ये समझा गया कि अब शायद अरब ममालिक के साथ हालात बेहतर होना शुरू हो जाएंगे, लेकिन प्रैक्टिकली स्पीकिंग जो कुछ ग्राउंड पे होता रहा वो सबके सामने रहा। ग्राउंड पे किस तरह से बच्चों की शादतें होती रहीं, किस तरह से रमज़ान मुबारक के 27वीं रात को भी मस्जिद अक्सा पे हमला किया गया और वहाँ पे लोगों को तशद्दुद का निशाना बनाया गया, किस तरह से बच्चों को प्रिजनर रखा गया, किस तरह से ख़वातीन को हॉस्टेज बनाया गया, ख़वातीन को गिरफ्तार किया गया, और क्या कुछ इंसानियत सोच सलूक नहीं होता रहा। यूनाइटेड नेशन की करारदादें मौजूद हैं नाज़रीन, और यूनाइटेड नेशन की करारदादें हमेशा ये कहती हैं कि यहाँ पे मामले को हल किया जाए और इंसाफ से मामला हल किया जाए। अब इंसाफ का मामला तो अगर शुरू से देखा जाए तो अगर फ़लस्तीन का रकबा आहिस्ता इसराइल के कब्ज़े में जा रहा है तो फिर फ़लस्तीन के पास आखिर ऑप्शन कौन से बचते हैं। फ़लस्तीन अगर अक़वाम मुत्तहिदा करारदादों के मुताबिक अगर अपना मसला हल नहीं करवा सकता तो फिर फ़लस्तीन के पास ऑप्शन कौन से बचते हैं। यही हालत कश्मीर की है। मकबूजा कश्मीर के लोगों ने अपनी कश्मीर की आज़ादी के लिए 1947 से लेकर आज तक जदोजहद की, लेकिन वहाँ पे क्या हालत हुई। किसी ने ठीक कहा था कि जब जंग की बात होने लगी तो अमेरिकन एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन से कहा गया कि वहाँ पे लाखों लोगों की जाने जाएंगी, लेकिन साथ में 2 कुत्ते भी मारे जाएंगे। तो साथ बैठे हुए शख्स ने पूछा था कि 2 कुत्ते क्यों? उसने कहा था सिर्फ इस वजह से क्योंकि तुमने 2 कुत्तों का सवाल किया, लेकिन वो जो लाखों जाने वाली हैं उन लाखों जानों का सवाल नहीं किया गया। आज भी शायद हमें 10, 15, 20 इंसान की एक जान भी बहुत कीमती है, लेकिन 10, 15, 20 लोगों की हमें ज़्यादा परवाह है। लेकिन आज भी जो लाखों लोग कुर्बानियाँ दे चुके हैं उनके लिए इंसाफ आज भी मुमकिन नज़र नहीं आता, और चाहे वो फ़लस्तीन हो चाहे वो कश्मीर हो। हमारे साथ आज इस अहम टॉपिक पर बात करने के लिए और फ़लस्तीन के क्या हालात हैं उस पर बात करेंगे। हमारे साथ मौजूद होंगी शरीन महमूद साहिबा। शरीन साहिबा, बहुत शुक्रिया आपका मैं ज्वाइन करने के लिए। ह्यूमैनिटेरियन ग्राउंड पे काम करती हैं, फ़लस्तीन में भी इनके चक्कर लगते रहते हैं। फ़लस्तीन के हवाले से इनसे बात करने की कोशिश करेंगे। हमारे साथ मौजूद होंगे मुज़म्मिल अयूब ठाकर साहब, वर्ल्ड कश्मीर फ्रीडम मूवमेंट के प्रेसिडेंट हैं। मुज़म्मिल अयूब ठाकर साहब, आपका बहुत शुक्रिया मैं वक्त देने के लिए। कश्मीर और फ़लस्तीन की हालत के लिए मेरे ख्याल में अगर इंटेलेक्चुअल माइंड सेट को देखा जाए तो मुझे इनसे बेहतर मेहमान आज के लिए नज़र नहीं आए। तो शरीन महमूद साहब, पहले तो मैं आपकी तरफ आता हूँ, इस वक्त क्या सिचुएशन है फ़लस्तीन की? क्योंकि जब मैं फ़लस्तीन की बात करता हूँ तो फिर शायद यकीनन आप बेहतर जानते हैं वहाँ पे हालात को, तो गजा की पट्टी से हट के आगे इस वक्त सिचुएशन है क्या फ़लस्तीन में?
I think so. Assalamu alaikum to everyone, first and foremost. In the age of social media and news, independent news organizations, it's actually easy for us to follow what's happening in. You've got Gaza, obviously we know the death toll's increasing, the airstrikes are happening, there's a lot of death and destruction, families are being targeted, residential areas are being targeted. It's been announced that they need to leave the areas, and Israel has said that it's not going to be a clean operation for them to clear this area. So they've suggested that they will be absolutely destroying Gaza Strip specifically. I'm not sure whether you caught the Scottish PM Hamza Yousaf. His mum and dad are currently actually in Gaza, and they are stuck in Gaza. They went a week ago to visit their elderly mum, and they've been told they need to go, but there's no means for them to actually leave Gaza. So he's extremely worried, as you can imagine, whether his parents will survive this, because not many people are surviving. The surrounding areas, the villages, everywhere is being affected. Jerusalem, there's been attacks there. The settlers are attacking people. There's curfews. Masjid al-Aqsa is on lockdown. People aren't able to go. Anybody who's trying to get into Masjid al-Aqsa is being beaten, including the women. And it's a very, very scary situation right now. So, of course, we know by now that the Palestinians don't specifically have their own defense systems in place. There's no army, there's no soldiers, there's no nothing. This was a organized sort of retaliation to the increased attacks on Masjid al-Aqsa, which of course is a red line for many. It was daily storming of Masjid al-Aqsa by 500-600 Israeli Jews who were going in and doing their ritualistic prayers and things like that, going into the mosque, going into the mimbar area, the prayer areas with their shoes on and doing their various rituals, which was a red line for a lot of the Muslims. Shutting down of Ibrahimi Mosque, even in Hebron, banning Muslims from praying at their mosque. There's been increased escalation over the past few months, actually. So the question arises is, did the world know that this was going to go down? There's only so much you can take as a people who believe that they are there to protect Masjid al-Aqsa, when there's talk of extremist, government officials talking about annexing and destroying and demolishing the mosque itself. So I do believe there's a lot to see yet in Palestine.
Masjid al-Aqsa does not belong to Hamas only. It belongs to the Muslims, 6 billion Muslims in the world. And when you're talking about 1.6 billion Muslims in the world, and then you're talking about hurting their sentiments, hurting their emotional feelings and religious feelings and religious attachment, how much do you think it should affect, and why the world does not realize that every religion and their religious attachments have certain type of value? That sometimes it's okay
It's
for
a good
Jews
question.
to have their Holocaust and everything, but when it comes to Muslim, there is no Holocaust. Anyone can kill Muslims anytime, anywhere in the world. And last decades and maybe last couple of decades are quite obvious when you see the killings of Muslims.
It's a good question you posed there, actually, to be honest. And the first finger is at the Muslim community and the Muslim ulama and the Muslim scholars. If we don't have a love for Masjid al-Aqsa, if we don't ourselves understand the significance of Masjid al-Aqsa, then shame on us, firstly. I regularly ask this question whenever I'm asked to speak at any sort of protests for Palestine. We're all there with our placards and we're going free Palestine, etc., etc. But when I ask how many of you have been to Masjid al-Aqsa, there's usually one or two hands that go up. And this is something that, I still don't understand. I do lay the blame at our ulama and scholars who don't teach the congregations about what Masjid al-Aqsa is and what its significance is. It's the third holiest site. We are prescribed to visit that for extra rewards, just like Masjid al-Haram and just like Masjid al-Nabwi. It's the third masjid that we are supposed to visit. Now, the whole land around that is supposed to be blessed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself directly mentions it as blessed lands within the Quran. We know that the angels are spreading their wings over this blessed land. We know that Dome of Rock is the site of Isra wal Miraj. We know that that is the only place on earth that all of the prophets, peace be upon all of them, the previous prophets, have prayed behind Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, including the angels. So every inch of that land is blessed. And for us to have allowed it to be occupied for this many years, and for us to, for the people that have been able to visit it, and we connect with the Palestinians and we understand how they are ready and they are welcoming martyrdom during this time. All I am hearing is they are ready to bleed and they are ready to give up their lives to protect Masjid al-Aqsa. So the rest of the community, I don't know.
I'm
If
sure
you're
you are
asking me where
still
the rest of the Muslim community is, I don't know.
Shirin, still you are in contact with people of Palestine, even I'm sure at this time as well. how's the connection is going? Still you can manage to talk to them, what they're saying, what the ground situation is? Have they got any, like the Hamas said, you have to give the warning first before attacking anyone? Are they receiving warnings before the attacks, or are they just receiving the attacks?
So, the main Hamas and the organizations that are involved in this, the flood operation, that's very much surrounding, Gaza and the settler areas. Most of my friends are actually in Jerusalem, so they're around the masjid. So I'm getting regular updates from them. There's organizations, obviously, other independent organizations that are sharing the news on social media with what's actually going on politically. I can only speak from a humanitarian perspective. I stay out of the politics of it, and I stay out of what exactly is happening in terms of the retaliation and the violence and all of that stuff. From a humanitarian perspective, I can tell you there are babies and there are children and there are women that are getting killed. The occupying forces are a brutal occupying forces, and the genocide that is currently happening. There was a phosphorus cluster bomb that was, that was dropped on Gaza just yesterday. This is internationally, this is banned. So these are war crimes. They are government ministers that are saying clearly on video to the nations, to America, to the West, that we are going to, we're going to erase it. There are politicians in the US who are tweeting, finish them, to the Palestinians. They are absolutely on a murderous sort of campaign at this point. And, what we can do is just at least learn the basics and understand what we should be doing in terms of making dua and raising awareness and lobbying our councillors, our MPs, on that this is an unacceptable situation. Just like they had such a massive response for Ukraine, what on earth, look at the contrast of how they responded to the Ukraine situation and look how they are responding to the Palestinian situation. The fact that we had the Israeli flag on 10 Downing Street, when everybody can see quite clearly where the war is, heavy-handed, and who has the army, the 300,000 people that they've got on reserves, ready to deploy for a ground operation. The most biggest ship, I think I read somewhere, the US has the biggest ship to support Israel as well. They are focusing all their energies they're taking from Ukraine. They're sending 8 billion they've approved to Israel, and there is such a massive support for the Israeli government. It's just absolutely shocking. And all I can see on the Palestinian side is babies being pulled out of the rubble, women who are scared. They're too scared to live in their homes. It's widespread destruction and devastation. It's a huge atrocity for
It
the
is a
Muslim
huge
community.
human crisis. Muzammil Ayub Thakur, मैं आपकी तरफ आता हूँ. You heard the situation in Palestine. I'm sure you're pretty much aware of the situation in Palestine as well. You've seen Kashmir yourself. You've seen the Kashmiri situation when the curfew was on there. After 5th of October, the way people couldn't come out of their house, the people who flew back to the different countries, when we saw their videos on their mobile phones, we saw the bloodshed on the streets of Srinagar, on the streets of Indian occupied Kashmir. Why the world has such kind of double standards? It's okay to carry on killing Palestinians as long as you want. Since 1947, it's okay to keep killing Indian occupied Kashmiris since 1947. It's okay to kill over 100,000 people just from 80s. What makes you think that it's okay to discuss one side and not discuss other side? But when Israel was doing the killings and abductions and the kidnappings of Palestinians, then it was okay just to have verbal couple of sentences and that was it. Same thing with India. But when it comes to supporting Israel, then ships, $8 billion, weapons, all kind of ammunition, same support to India as well. What do you think, what makes the difference between the countries to support one compared to other more?
You could even add Russia into the mix, that the fact that they call Russia the aggressor, and they've implied that Russia also needs to have sanctions because they are an aggressor, they are occupying parts of Ukraine. It's no different to what the Israelis are doing, no different to what the Indians are doing. The problem is always comes back to geopolitical, strategic and economic interests. whatever suits America, whatever suits Europe, whatever suits a certain military complex, industrial complex, that is what is going to hit the news. In the day of social media, you know, it's usually been for citizen. Social media has been something great for citizens, journalists, people on the ground that can report the truth and let people know exactly what's going on. But the problem has always also been that your opposition, your opponent, your oppressor, your occupier, your subjugator is also going to use that social media. And we've seen how Israel and even India, for that matter, have manipulated social media, have flooded social media, be it Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, and giving false information, false facts to people, you know, even rallying them to oppose what is happening to the Palestinians. Seen on social media, even our own Muslim brothers and sisters condemning the Palestinians for resisting. So when we say that, why is the West so hypocritical when it comes to different causes, and why it's okay for the Goliath to crush David, it's simply because it serves somebody's interest. And in this case, it's worth looking into. I think there was a video that came out a few years ago that resurfaced just a couple of days ago of Benjamin Netanyahu talking about how they would wipe out the Palestinians to the extent that their suffering and their contribution to their cause would cost too much. And somebody asked him, what about the Americans? What about the condemnation? And Benjamin Netanyahu said, what condemnation? So what if they condemn? What have we suffered so far? So the reality is that nobody has a problem, and Israel knows this for a fact, that they can do anything they feel like, commit genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, ethnic cleansing, and, as we've seen, settler colonialism and demographic change with no consequence. Nobody's going to bat an eyelid, nobody's going to say a word. And if they do, Israel also knows they will never be held accountable.
Musammal, there's something being used, as Shireen mentioned, the cluster bombs has been used in Kashmir as well. There's something used, pellet guns, which has been used in Kashmir as well. We've seen the innocent kids facing the pellet guns, bullets on their faces, getting blind. These things are banned from European Union, banned from Amnesty International, banned from United Nations, and nobody really gives a toss, basically, that if they're still getting used against the kids, against the women, against the people of Kashmir and people of Palestine, how the world should be United Nations should be respected around the world, because it doesn't seem to serve equality on both sides. It seems to serve one side's interest. And if that is the case, then shall people or shall the world listen to United Nations or European Union or anybody else?
Yeah, it can't be one rule for you and another rule for me. It's unacceptable. The United Nations, unfortunately, is a body that can only offer guidance, and as it stands, it can offer guidance and resolutions. The problem is when it comes to implementing it, who is going to implement it? When you have nations that have veto power, which includes, and let's be specific, the United States, that has a veto power, they can decide to completely cancel, eradicate, and go back and renege on any agreement, any resolution. We've seen it happen with Palestine innumerable number of times, and we've seen it with many other nations as well. So the United Nations in itself, whether we give it respect or not, it has a certain necessity where people go physically and they talk and they respectfully disagree with one another in public. But the reality is, when it comes to enforcing international law, that doesn't exist anywhere. So therefore, I think the real question eventually becomes, is there value to international law if only the responsibility of implementing it is only on one party and not every single party? And in this context, let's talk about the Palestinians, or rather, for that matter, the Hamas, that we are going to, the world community is going to pass judgment on Hamas for the actions that they in Israel, then equally, if not more, there must be international law implemented, particularly human rights law must be implemented on the Israelis that have committed acts of war, acts of human rights abuses, genocide, ethnic cleansing, war crimes. And it has to be an equal measure. You cannot hold an occupied people more responsible than the occupier.
You cannot hold the occupied people more responsible than the occupier, which is a genuine fact of this world. But unfortunately, we seem to see one side which is in our interest, and we seem to forget that the side which is not in our interest. Let's accept the reality that 3,000 innocent people were killed in 9/11, and they were innocent people were killed by the terrorists in a terrorist attack. Now, in response to that terrorist attack, in response to that terrorism activity, there's something called war against terrorism starting. And that war against terrorism did not kill those 8 people who were engaged in all this and their supporters, but that war against terrorism killed millions and millions in Afghanistan, in Syria, in Libya, in Kashmir, in everywhere, in Iraq especially, everywhere in the world they killed millions and millions of people just on the response of 3,000 innocent people. So if the justice is going to be in this side, then we have to think about what the justice is. And is this the right way for people to not trust international law and go against the international law? Or there is still a hope where someone can think, okay, let's respect the international law and let's follow that rule. That question rises, acceptable or not acceptable for many people, but that question rises on one side. Shireen, my question to you is related to humanitarian ground. Now the situation in Palestine is quite critical. People have only 4 hours of electricity in the whole day. In 24 hours, the water has been stopped, the food has been stopped, the supermarkets has been targeted. Shireen, is there any chance, because now they're also talking about putting a ban on some kind of aid that which goes from different countries to Palestine and to Gaza. They're talking about this ban as well. Would there be any kind of fairness to the people of the world to not let the food and the water and the drinks get to those kids and those the victims of Palestine and Hamas and Israel issue?
So look, I mean, already Gaza was under a huge blockade anyway. They were very limited in terms of movement. There's checkpoints, there's limited supplies coming in and out anyway. Now, in this current situation, they've said clearly, we're stopping everything. Just recently, warplanes have attacked the Rafah-Egypt border as well. So that was the only way that normally is opened for aid to get through. They made it quite clear that any trucks that would be coming through there would be blown to smithereens. So again, this is indicative of a very dire situation. One way or another, they are planning on, they're not planning on allowing anyone to survive this.
Shireen, the question rises on the other side as well. When you know the technology of Israel is really world-renowned technology of Israel, what happens to that technology when people can come on skydiving and come in different ways into Palestine, into Israel? Was there Israel army or was Israel agencies where they sleep, or what was happening? Because they did not pay no attention to that. So do you think they allowed it on purpose so they can do what they were planning to do a couple of years back?
You know what, I couldn't comment. God knows. Allahu Alim at this point. The Palestinians, of course, celebrated the fact that, it took a spoon, to even get through a tunnel and break through. Yes, they have everything at their disposal. The Israeli occupying forces, they have everything at their disposal. They have the most high-tech weaponry, etc., etc. But I mean, I think I'd want to highlight at this point, if they're doing this in response to, this Palestinian resistance, you hear of the stories already from the Palestinians. If they are taking hostages, for example, the way they are treating women and children, and how they're saying, "Don't worry, we are Muslims. We don't expect. We're not going to do anything to harm you." And they're using the instruction of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, in terms of what happens during battles and protecting women and children and innocent people. Whereas what the government, the Israeli government is doing is specifically targeting an open-air prison, which is Gaza. And they are fully going after hospitals, schools, residential areas. They don't care who they kill, at this point. So the difference that, there's a stark contrast there that I wanted to highlight, that in terms of resistance effort and the way they are behaving and the way they are, within themselves, their strategy compared to what Israel is doing, that's something that we need to discuss.
Shouldn't any possible way you think that this time, if there was any aid could be delivered to Palestine, would there be any possible way to do that, or do you think it's too early for
We're
that
working on
yet?
it. I think we're working on it. The humanitarian organizations are trying their best to work out how to do it and how it's possible. But you can imagine if everyone's under curfew, if if the only options are being blown up, it's going to be a very difficult situation. There's no water already. 97% of the water is contaminated anyway. How these people are going to survive the next few days, I don't know. There's need for emergency supply, emergency food, clean water access. Time will tell over the next few days
There
what
is
happens,
no
but it's a very,
access to such kind of facilities, basic facilities to living, to surviving. There's no such kind of access to Palestinians, and this is what the world we are living in now. Muzammal, now my question comes to you. You've seen the same situations in Indian occupied Kashmir as well, after when 370 and 35A been revoked. You've seen the situation there as well. There was the same situation. Nobody was allowed to come outside. On Eid's third day, one kid got hit by a slingshot by an Indian Army officer. Just only a kid who was 5-6 years old, who couldn't get the treatment because he was too young to get the treatment for that. In that kind of situation, you've seen the situation yourself. How the people of the world, and especially if I talk about the people of Kashmir, how they are feeling themselves related to this kind of situation of Palestine, what their emotions and what their sentiments are.
I think the first thing to say is that who knows better than the people of Kashmir what the people of Palestine are going through? Who can empathize more? Who can sympathize more? Who feels exactly the same as what the Palestinians do? Those are the people of Kashmir. They've witnessed everything that the Palestinians do, to the extent that we must also remember and recognize that Israel and India are some of the biggest military partners in the world. India is one of the largest importers of Israeli weapons, and they have regular training sessions, and they are very, very close in their relationships. So when we see what's happening in Palestine, I think it's going to get, from the perspective of Kashmiri, it's going to get worse. You see, we've never had, as you know, Palestine at least has in the past had opportunities for international aid agencies to come in. For Kashmir, we've never been allowed that. We've never had international aid agencies come into the conflict zone and to provide relief and aid to the victims of the occupation. But that said, as it stands right now, if all doors are closed, and of course the Israeli NGOs are not going to be contributing in there, even if they are the liberal kind, they will not be contributing towards the Palestinians. I think right now what we're going to be seeing is an exponential growth in human rights violations, but more importantly, in the need for aid. And nobody was going to be able to provide it. And it doesn't matter where it's going to come from, but nobody will be able to provide it. If the EU decides to sanction the Palestinian Authority, that's a completely different matter. That is a political matter. When it comes to the aid and the relief that's necessary, remember that more than half the population of Gaza are children. Children. And we've seen the dead bodies of children. We've seen how their homes have been destroyed. We've seen how they've lost their parents, their loved ones. And nobody there to provide them relief. So from the perspective of Kashmiri, we understand and we sympathize, completely, 100%. But what we really need to do, and this is again from a Kashmiri that suffered through this, is that the world community must aim harder, faster, and make sure that the people inside Palestine, inside the Gaza Strip particularly, get that relief as much as possible. We don't want the people of Gaza, we don't want any single Palestinian to suffer the same way that the Kashmiris have suffered for more than 75 years. So we would urge everybody to put pressure to get access into Palestine.
Someone putting pressure, doing awareness, everything is understandable. But at the same time, you have seen yourself, you have seen the practical situation in Indian occupied Kashmir. Shireen, have seen the situation in Palestine, met the people directly, how they are feeling. Now, do you think putting the pressure or any kind of, what kind of pressure could make any impact on the local politicians of the UK, if I talk about?
Unfortunately, we've seen some of our own politicians, Muslim politicians, that have sided with Israel These are politicians that a lot of the community looked up to. The community even elected, voted into power, made sure that our voices were heard, and yet those voices no longer represent the Muslim majority in the UK. They no longer represent the sentiments of the Muslims in the UK. So it's a very pertinent question that how much pressure can we possibly put, especially when we're seeing our own politicians turning their back on Masjid al-Aqsa, turning their back on the Muslims, turning their back on the Palestinians. You're absolutely right. However, we have faith. We also have to recognize that we have a certain amount of because we are a vote bank. The Muslims, whether we like to use this term or not, we are a vote bank for certain areas, for certain politicians. उसको इस्तेमाल करना है. If you don't like your politician, you don't like your MP, you don't like the way that they're voting, get them out of power. It is as simple as that. Put the right people into power. We keep on electing the same old people for whatever reason, Baradari politics, because of the immigration reasons. That is not how you are supposed to vote. If you are going to vote, if you're going to vote, you have to safeguard the interests of the Muslims here and abroad. That is the only way they are putting pressure on these elected officials.
We have to put these pressures somehow to these electric officials. They have to do something about it. And I really don't understand. The first thing comes as your religion. And if you can't stand by your religion, if you can't stand by humanity, I don't know who you're going to stand for. If as a Muslim you can't stand for Masjid al-Aqsa, I can't trust you that you're going to stand tomorrow for 10 Downing Street. If you can't stand for Masjid al-Aqsa today, you can't stand for the Parliament House or anything else in the future. So I can't trust any of the politicians who don't have respect for the humanitarian grounds, for the political attachments, and for the religious attachments. If you don't have respect for that, on the fairness, on the equality, on the basis of fundamental rights, I really don't think that how you're going to be able to represent the people of United Kingdom. Shireen, I'm sure you have spoken to many ladies and the kids and the family as well. How are they feeling in Palestine at this time, and especially the people who are living abroad, who got families in Palestine? Are they still in contact with each other? Can they manage to talk to each other, find out how things are, how families are, or they're still not aware of their whereabouts, what's going on?
I think, look, so internet is really intermittent right now. So anyone who's stuck in Gaza and is in a situation where they're potentially unreachable, our ground partners in Gaza, again, it's very difficult to get any good communication from them. They are on the ground, they are distributing what aid they can. But again, it's whatever was stockpiled in the first place. There's going to be, at some point that's going to run out. And the sheer level of, deaths and injuries, you can understand from medical supplies, those will be gone as well. In terms of how they are feeling, I can't even imagine, because they'll be hearing bombs all the way throughout the night, including during the day. We're seeing airstrikes happen all throughout the day, all throughout the night. People are, vlogging their experiences. So people can see this. If you only have to go onto Instagram and TikTok to see what's happening, and it is scary. Having children myself, I can't even imagine when you can't protect your children, you can't protect yourself. There's no knowing when your building will be taken out. So again, to reiterate, they are attacking hospitals, schools, and residential buildings. There's nothing that's safe in Gaza.
But Shireen, it comes back to the question where you got option that you at least you're living, you're surviving, you're highlighting the issue. But when your survival is at risk, you are going to react somehow. That reaction shouldn't be called as terrorism then.
I mean, the self-defense is self-defense by definition. The Palestinians are defending their right to exist. Their resistance has always been off this basis that we're being occupied. They don't have, they're refugees on their own land. They are kicked out of their own homes. Of course, it's very difficult to see if that home has been within your family for, several generations, if not more than that. The youth that you talk about that are, the majority of Gaza, you can imagine that their grandparents were kicked out or murdered out of their own homes. And they've grown up witnessing airstrike after airstrike, checkpoints, lack of access to, normal amenities, education. They get arrested. They get, and for what? They don't even know why they're being arrested. They regularly take children. Their human rights are violated. They aren't able to work. Their farmlands are destroyed regularly. Anything that they try and do, it's there's a constant tug of war. They're spat at. Even there's something to mention here as well. It's not just the Palestinian Muslims that are running scared right now. The Christians are being attacked as well. The Palestinian Christians, one of their churches was destroyed yesterday or the day before. So missile attacks are affecting all the Palestinians, and it's not seeing just the Muslims. The Muslims make up the majority in Gaza, but the attacks by the Israeli government.
So when you're
War
putting
crimes.
someone into right at the edge, when you got no other option for survival and for existence, then you have to resist. That resistance is supported by the United Nations, by the international law. Muzammal, when we talk about that resistance and international law, why international law says that when you are put in a position where you have to resist to have your survival, because before this Hamas incident and the Israeli incident, 230 plus people been killed in Palestine in just this recent month. If that has been the situation before and this resistance is now no other option, then how the international law supports it?
Look, so it's not just about the most recent events. We have to recognize that it is defense of their lands, defense of their dignity and honor. These are the terms that the United Nations resolutions uses. So if you look at the land, of course, we know there is settled colonialism to force demographic change. If we talk about dignity and honor, it's very apparent that there is no dignity and honor being given to the people of Palestine. So they are protecting their properties, they are protecting their lives, they are protecting themselves. The international law provides agency to those people, particularly those that live in an occupied territory, not a disputed territory, an occupied territory. And people are calling this is an occupied territory. So therefore, there is legitimacy for them to resist. It doesn't matter whether there is a democratically elected government in place or not. The law provides space to those people to resist against any kind of overture from the Israeli army and the Israeli government that intends to extract them from their own homes. Look, these aren't terms that we're using from 50, 60 years ago. We've seen this, and not like our children or rather our parents have seen this. We've seen this with our own eyes in the last year. Not just the desecration of the holy masjid, not just the desecration of the churches, not just the murder of journalists like Shireen, and today there was another 2 more journalists that were killed. We've seen day in and day out how they cage children, how they kill children, how they use them as human shields, how they've eliminated women at point blank range, shooting them right in the chest, how the elderly are pushed around, and even because of course these elderly people are frail, so they're thrown to the ground and they're killed instantly. If this does not, look, let's leave the international law aside for a moment. Even morally, nobody can reject the premise that the people of Palestine have the right to resist. And let us ultimately also talk about what Islam says. Islam also says to protect your family, your property, your livelihood, your dignity, your honor, your religion. You have every right to react and even commit action against the oppressor. So it doesn't matter whether it's international law or whether it's the moral dilemma. Islam allows it.
Islam allows it, and to be honest, when we talk about the Islamic permission given to the people, how to react in the certain situations, where United Nations have the international law in place, how to react in the certain situation. So when you are talking about the occupied territories, then occupied territories have the occupier too. So there should be action against the occupiers too, and United Nations resolutions for Kashmir, for Palestine. If there is no actions going to be taken about those United Nations resolutions, then what's the point to having United Nations resolutions? Now, no matter if it's an innocent Israeli kid, Jew kid, no matter if it's an innocent Palestinian kid, Muslim kid, or Christian kid, it doesn't make any difference to anybody, because at the end of the day, it's giving the benefit to certain mentality or certain people who are taking advantage of this whole situation. and the whole situation is giving advantage to certain mindset which is creating the difference between Muslim, Jews and the Christians, but don't want to work together to bring peace on the table. Shireen, now my question is going to be a little bit political on the other side. When it comes to Middle Eastern countries, Muslim countries, they don't support Palestine as they should be. When Muslims country don't support a Muslim country, how we can expect the certain type of support from the non-Muslim countries then?
I think it is like, look, at the base of it, I think we've discussed this previously about the lack of unity and lack of understanding that we have of our own faith and how we should lead our lives as ambassadors in this dunya, which is temporary. So when we're talking about leadership, neither do I see any strong ethical leadership within our Muslims locally, neither do I see internationally. In terms of governments and Muslim governments, what do we expect from them when clearly their policies are, even of Saudi, even of the Muslim countries that we expect to be held to a higher standard, they don't. They perhaps put power, greed, and money first over, what is best for the Muslim community. So, it's a bit of I'm out of my depth answering this question, I'll be honest with you, because all I can be is overwhelmed with the lack of integrity of our Muslim Ummah and leadership. But in response to that, all I can say is we need to look within ourselves and fix ourselves individually, our communities, our families, and then perhaps Allah will send His help. Because at the end of the day, it's the power is in the handful of men. Whilst we're on this dunya, and this is why we see so much war, this is why we see so much humanitarian crises. There's no integrity.
There is no integrity left. Of course, there's no integrity left when a kid being killed is justified, when a mother being raped is justified, when a brother being killed, shot dead is justified, when a kid facing pellet gun on the face is justified. And doesn't make a difference, to be honest, how peaceful citizen of any place, any country you are. Just look at your political representatives. When they go in those countries where they were supposed to talk about the human rights, they don't talk about the human rights. They don't talk about the normal issues of human lives. But yes, we are willing to give lectures to the world how the peace should work. And unfortunately, this is the result of those lectures. The end of the day, the benefit of a common man is not nobody's interest, not even, which is why Muzammil rightly said that we have to think about who we vote, who we get in the power, and why we get in the power. If after, I think since 50s and 60s, some people migrated into this country. If after this long time, still we have to think about immigration system, still we have to think about the benefit system before casting our vote, then we need to rethink and we have to recalculate the situation before casting our votes. Muzammil, my last question is going to be about the situation in Indian occupied Kashmir. Modi, if you look at the world is fully in support of Modi. Indian regime is getting full support from the world. Pakistan case about the Kashmir is not being representative the way it should have been represented. The Kashmir issue seems like being under too much pressure. What the ground situation is in Indian occupied Kashmir, Muzammil?
2 more resistance fighters were martyred today. So when India talks about normalcy come returning to Kashmir, when they talk about development, Sarak Bijli Pani in Kashmir, it's a misnomer. Nobody in Kashmir is aspiring for that. If that was the truth, if that is exactly what people wanted, then the resistance would not continue. The resistance exists simply for the dismantling of occupation, subjugation, and oppression. So it doesn't matter how much India pushes forward this false narrative that the people of Kashmir have embraced the dissolving of Article 370-35A and they want to be Indians. It is simply not true. The ground reality is that people continue to be subjugated, they continue to be oppressed, the resistance continues to resist as they should. Our political leadership continue to be jailed or murdered inside jail. I only need to remind you of Sayyid Ali Shah Gilani, Ashraf Sahrai, Marhum, the shahada that they had to give. And of the continued violence against women and children that goes on inside Kashmir. the problem with the issue of Kashmir is that the news cycle just does not exist. All the media centers, all the media houses that existed in Kashmir have either been shut down, the journalists have been put to jail, or they've been bought up by the Indian government. So therefore, even the truth and reality cannot come out. Unlike, for example, Palestine, where you have the world's attention, the world's eyes on this conflict, on this oppression that's going on. So you can, even if there is false information, but at least you have the cover that there is some relevant and important truths that are coming out from Palestine as well. In regards to Kashmir, it comes very, very, sporadically. Very rarely we'll get the truth. And the only way that you can actually get the reality on the ground is by knowing the right people in the right places and being able to communicate with them. लेकिन ये भी एक मुसीबत है, because they are too afraid to communicate with anybody from the outside world.
To be honest, which is why I had to go kind of behind the scene as well, because some gentlemen who used to come on this show, unfortunately, they are in prison now in Indian occupied Kashmir. And to be honest, sometimes we say to brothers from Indian occupied Kashmir, come on the show, they are ready. But sometimes we have to think twice before getting them onto the show, because what's going to happen next? And next story, trust me, is scary, but I wish if we could do something. Muzammal, last your message from as an Indian occupied Kashmiri and as a representative for these special issues of Kashmir and Palestine, what would be your last message to the listeners today?
The people of Kashmir have always stood by the people of Palestine, by the cause of Palestine. Not only do we stand with them, we give our lives for them. How many people from Kashmir have stood up and protested on the streets of the occupied territory of Kashmir, and knowing full well that we will either go to jail or we'll be killed for standing with the people of Palestine. I can tell you about a story several years back when there was another airstrike in Gaza, that the world community, everybody, there were so many protests in every city of the world, but only one person was martyred, only one person was killed, protesting for the people of Palestine. That was a young boy in Kashmir. So understand that even people like Kashmiris that are being oppressed, that have some of the worst human rights violations under the worst conditions, if we can stand for the people of Palestine, give our lives for the people of Palestine, what is the excuse of those people that live in luxury, that live in privilege?
Thank you so much, Muzammal, for joining us today. Shireen, your last message for today for the viewers who are watching this program today.
I think just learn. Just learn everything that's happening in the Muslim community. Learn from our history. Learn from the Quran. Learn from what our beloved Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, taught us about justice. There's so much in the Quran. There's so many hadith, and what we can do minimum is make dua for the people who are oppressed around the world. And it's often that, these two issues are discussed alongside one another on Takbeer TV, but reality is the same as what I've said before. If we cannot protect our holy masjid, the Masjid al-Aqsa, there is no other issue after that anybody will support, because we hold our deen and our, the desire to achieve taqwa and Jannah and the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in such high regard. But we can't even protect Masjid al-Aqsa. So where are we going to protect other brothers and sisters, be it in Kashmir, be it in China, be it in Yemen, be it in, all these humanitarian crises. There's crises everywhere, there's oppression everywhere. But I would say, if we're going to do anything, if we're going to be able to achieve anything, the first thing we need to do is achieve freedom for the Palestinians and the protection of Masjid al-Aqsa.
इंशाल्लाह। शरीन, थैंक यू सो मच फॉर जॉइनिंग अस। नाज़रीन, आपने दोनों की बातें सुनी, दोनों की बातों से एक चीज़ बड़ी वाज़िया तौर पर नज़र आ गई, और वाज़िया तौर पर नज़र आने वाली चीज़ ये है कि आपको अपनी चीज़ें प्रायोरिटाइज़ करनी पड़ेंगी। और प्रायोरिटी है क्या? अगर खुदा ने आपको मुसलमानों के घर पैदा कर दिया तो आपको बहुत बहुत मुबारक, लेकिन मुसलमानों के घर में पैदा होके अगर गैर मुस्लिमों की तरह मरना है, अगर इंसानियत के लिए खड़े नहीं होना, अगर मस्जिद अक्सा के तहफ़्फ़ुज़ के लिए खड़े नहीं होना, अगर हक़ के लिए आवाज़ नहीं उठानी, तो यकीन जाने ना तो आपके इंसान होने का मकसद रह जाता है, ना ही आपके मुसलमान होने का मकसद रह जाता है। हमारे पॉलिटिशियन से भी ये गुजारिश है कि अगर आप अपने आप को मुसलमान इंट्रोड्यूस करवा लेते हैं, इलेक्शन से पहले आप मुसलमान होने का कहकर मसाजिद में कंपेन करते हैं, मसाजिद में जाकर कंपेन करते हैं, लोगों से वोट मांगते हैं, तो क्या इस वक्त आपका इस्लाम कहीं चला गया है? क्या इस वक्त आपको इस्लाम की ज़रूरत नहीं है? क्या आपके पास इस वक्त इस्लाम की कोई गुंजाइश बाकी नहीं रही? तो जिस वक्त आपके पास वोट लेने के लिए आए, उनसे ज़रूर دوبارہ سے شاید کلمہ سننے کی بھی اگر نوبت آئے تو دوبارہ ان سے کلمہ ضرور سن لیجیے گا کہ جو آج اپنے مذہب کے لیے کھڑے نہیں ہو رہے, اپنے دین کے لیے کھڑے نہیں ہو رہے, اپنی مسجد اقصیٰ کے لیے کھڑے نہیں ہو رہے, کیا کل وہ ڈاؤننگ اسٹریٹ کے لیے کھڑے ہوں گے, کل وہ آپ کے لیے کھڑے ہوں گے, کل آپ کسی کرسچن کے لیے, کسی جیو کے لیے, کسی ہندو کے لیے جو برطانیہ میں موجود ہے, کیا اس کے لیے کھڑے ہوں گے؟ تو جو لوگ خود کے ساتھ مخلص نہیں ہوتے وہ کسی کے ساتھ مخلص نہیں ہوتے. ناظرین ہمیں دعا میں یاد رکھیے گا. مزمل ایوب ٹھاکر ورلڈ کشمیر فریڈم موومنٹ کے چیئرمین کے پریزیڈنٹ, بہت شکریہ آپ کا ہمیں جوائن کرنے کے لیے. شرین محمود صاحبہ حجاب کے والے سے بھی بڑا کام کیا انہوں نے, اور ہیومینیٹیرین گراؤنڈز پہ فلسطین میں بھی کافی کام کیا انہوں نے. آپ کا بھی بہت شکریہ ہمیں جوائن کرنے کے لیے. ناظرین انشاءاللہ آپ سے پھر ملاقات ہوگی ہر ٹیوزڈے اور وینسڈے کو شام کو 5 سے 6 بجے یا 6 سے 7 بجے تک. انشاءاللہ دعا میں یاد رکھیے. السلام علیکم.